Hello, hello, hello. Thank you again for tuning in to Real Estate Real Talk with Julia M. Spencer on this Wednesday lunchtime. I hope I can give you some great entertainment again for the lunch hour and teach you a little bit about real estate, specifically real estate investing. My name is Julia M. Spencer. I will be your hostess for the next hour. I'll have control of this board and this microphone. Thank you so much for listening. You are listening to WRUULP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul. And today in the studio here with me, I have, again, Patrick Johnson. Patrick has been a guest on one of my previous shows. Welcome back, Patrick.
Thank you.
And we made a show actually about landscaping just maybe about 2 or 3 weeks ago.
It was about 3.5, 4 weeks ago or so, yeah.
And at that time, we were actually talking about a lot of different ways of how we can improve real estate with giving your real estate a little bit more of a pickup. And you wanted to come back to the show. Actually, we were going to talk about a couple of other things as well, because both of us have been landlords for many years. So that's going to be an interesting topic today. But first off, you wanted to follow up on something that you wanted to give some more information on from our last show. Why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, you mentioned, you asked me what would be a good source to go to find reputable landscapers, landscape architects, landscape designers, things like that. And I mentioned that we're fortunate enough, the owner of my particular company has gotten... he's gotten a reputation with various landscape architects and contractors that we don't necessarily advertise per se. But for those in the listening area, Better Business Bureau is always a good place to start. Angie's List. I mean, I don't even know if our company's even listed in Angie's List or not. I haven't checked. And you mentioned something that you found the other day as well.
Yeah, I actually needed to check up on some insulation for a house that I own. Actually, it's the same house we talked about last time. My little ugly duckling on 37th.
Soon to be a swan.
Yes, hopefully. But I need to get insulation. You know, I did not notice purchasing this home back in the day in the 40s, I guess. People didn't really insulate their homes. I mean, you go into an attic these days or in a crawl space and you see this really heavy padding on the bottom. I don't even know what it's called. I know there's like an R rating of how much insulation it actually is. And we would have to bring in our friend Joe, who's the construction guy on that, who would tell us all that. But the homes way back in the past weren't insulated. I mean, and there was probably no need for it either. I mean, there were fireplaces in almost every room.
Right. Well, but insulation nowadays, it serves two purposes. I mean, especially with the spray insulation, I don't know if I'm sure your listeners are familiar with that, but you can get the spray foam where they basically it's almost too tight. It seals the house so much. You can tell when usually houses have this in there because you walk in, you don't hear any external noise whatsoever. But houses, because you're using material that's it breathes. Wood breathes, sheetrock breathes, everything breathes, and there's pros and cons with the spray foam insulation, but you need it for the wintertime, obviously, but now in the summer as well. If you've got a pretty, a tight house with good insulation, it's going to help it keep cooler as well in the summertime.
And save you a lot on the electricity, that's
exactly.
for sure.
But I mean, also back in the 40s when the house was built, there was, I don't think AC didn't exist. It was fans or open windows.
No, you sit out on the porch.
Exactly.
And actually, a lot of houses were designed where the front door and the back door are kind of aligned. So when you open both up, you have a breeze going through. But anyway, we were getting distracted here a little bit. I did actually need to find somebody who could insulate the home. I know nothing about it. My contractor, Joe, that I use, and you guys, if you're listening here in Savannah, you're going to hear me talk about Joe a lot. Joe is my trusted go-to person that has saved me from many construction disasters. But he could do this as well, but, I'm in Savannah. He's kind of far away. So I went to Home Advisor, actually. That was the website I've used. And that's the first time I went there. And I guess it's the site where you enter all your information of what kind of project you need to get done. And they match you up with contractors. And then supposedly the contractors will call you back. But the good thing, I think we're talking about that on the way over here, is it's kind of like a review system where you can actually leave reviews if a contractor did a good job or a not so good job, and so other people can see how did this person do and whether it's a good person to go to get whatever job done.
Yeah, and that's important, especially when because I mean, again, as we talked about last time, you don't know what you're getting when someone comes to work on your house, and they may look like they know what they're doing, but yeah, I mean, and that would be my biggest worry when I have other people working on it. But fortunately for me, projects I've had done at my own home, they came highly recommended, or I went and saw their work, and we back up our work. I didn't talk about this on the last show, but when you're doing landscaping, if it's on a low end, it's difficult to get a contract per se, but in fact, I showed Julia a invoice of one of our clients right now, pretty high-end job that we're doing. But it's just basically a bill of sale. It has nothing to do with guarantees and whatnot, although we do back up the plants we buy. If we plant them and they're not transplanted by someone else, and they don't grow and take off like they're supposed to in the next year or 2 years, we will replace them at our cost. That should be a norm for anybody you're hiring to plant plants. Now, it's not necessarily going to be the case if you go buy the plants and have someone else plant them. If we're the ones picking and choosing, I mean, you let us know what you want, but normally a landscaper, if they're the ones going and you're giving them the reins to go and buy everything and then charge you for it, they should back it up. It should be at least a 2-year minimum on any type of plants.
Oh, 2 years. That's great. I remember buying plants over at the Home Depot, and they sometimes give you a guarantee for a year. You can bring back your receipt.
Right. Make sure you keep that receipt, though. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I kill most everything before the year is up anyway. So, I mean, for me, it's imperative to keep and save those receipts, I guess.
Yeah, we just got some news this week of a job we were doing. I don't want to mention necessarily exactly where it is, but the client is spending a large amount of money, and there's a lot going on. It's a whole redo of a building, and the people in charge of turning the water on, we planted all the plants, and they look great, and they forgot to turn the irrigation on, so they went 4 weeks without water, and a quarter of what we planted is dead. But the irrigation guys owned up to it. They said it's our fault. We knew we were supposed to turn it on. We didn't. So we're free and clear of this one. But it's a shame. I mean, all the time and effort we put into putting that in there, making it look good, and now it has to be replaced. And who knows if they're going to get as good a quality? But we'll see. That remains.
Now, is this something your company would have to pay for, the landscaping or the irrigation?
No, the irrigation
guys?
company,
Okay.
because they were responsible for making sure that the water was turned on after we got everything planted.
Wow. I hope they have good insurance, because I saw that bill is like $200,000 for landscaping.
No, that's a different job, but this one's not quite that crazy high. But like I said, there's just so many things happening at this one particular job site. There are probably 3 or 4 different contractors there, and that's the case, unfortunately. It's nice when you can have the property to yourself to focus and not be distracted and stay out of the way of everybody else. But there's also something to be said about getting it done all at once. I mean, people don't want to have people working in and outside their house for 2, 3, 4 years. So they try to all knock it off at once. But unfortunately, we end up stepping all over each other because of that.
Wow. And does this happen actually frequently, or that people will come back?
I'd say that, gosh, 4 of the big jobs we're involved with right now are all new construction. And because of that, they're trying to knock everything out at once. And we end up having to wait for people to get things done for us before we can move forward. We get in each other's way. Sometimes we're able to help each other. But, yeah, it's nicer. For example, we have a client that has 2 properties, one in the city, or one in Brooklyn and one up in Massachusetts. And we're doing things to help beef up their landscaping, and we're the only game in town, and that makes it so much easier when we can go and just do our thing and don't have to worry about interacting with other contractors. Because you got painters, you got carpenters, you got electricians, you got plumbers. I mean, everybody's there, especially when it's getting close to the deadline, when the client wants to move in. They want to get into their home. And so everyone's, especially near the end, is really busting to get everything done.
And thank you again so much for listening. You're listening to Real Estate Real Talk with Julia M. Spencer here on this fine Wednesday afternoon from Savannah, Georgia. In the studio here with me again is Patrick Johnson. He's a landscaping expert, but also, and this is what I failed to mention last time I had him on the show, he is actually also a landlord and has been for many, many years, just like myself. And I think we were comparing notes earlier on who has been a landlord longer. And I go back to 1996 because that was when I was 23 and I purchased my first home. So now everybody knows how old I am too. And you actually go back to pretty much the same time?
No, actually I was earlier. I was back
earlier?
In the 1980s.
Okay,
yeah,
well then you beat me by a long shot.
I bought, as an investment, I bought a townhouse condo up in Danbury, Connecticut when I was living in New York City at the time, and I became a landlord. You were talking about Home Advisor, how you can rate people and stuff like that. Unfortunately, I didn't have such a system back in the day. So as a landlord, you're kind of stuck with interviewing someone, and obviously you got to be careful about how you interview people. And you're hoping you get a good tenant. And I got a gentleman who was getting a divorce, had 2 kids. It was a 2-bedroom condo. And turns out that the kids ended up spending a lot more time with him than he had initially had told me.
Well, let's get back to that just a second. Let me just track back real quick. So, and that's actually a really good topic, is how do you evaluate tenants?
Yeah. So,
and that switching from, finding good contractors, but as a landlord, and since we both have been landlords, these systems that are in place today on the internet, Home Advisor, Angie's List, I think you mentioned maybe another one. Is probably more that I'm not even familiar with.
Yeah.
Better Business Bureau, that's right. You can find out all kinds of things about contractors, whether they're licensed and what kind of license they have. Actually, I went online the other day to try to find about licensing for a specific contractor because I needed it for an insurance claim of all places. And I couldn't find it, asked the contractor, and after about 2 hours of back and forth, he admitted that, hey, I have no license. I'm like, well, thanks for letting me know,
Right.
But they'll tell you anything, and these days it's so easy to find out things. But I was telling you in the car over here, I really wish we had a system in place, kind of like Airbnb, where guests rate hosts
Right.
and hosts rate guests, for tenants as well, long-term tenants. But back in the day, we didn't have that.
It was references. You basically they had to list people that they had rented from before, and if they'd ever rented before, you had to call those people and ask, what was so and so like as a tenant. Who knows if you were getting the correct information or not? I know I used to tell people, I had a tenant who, we're not gonna get too many stories here, but I think I told people,
I do actually want to hear your stories.
I know. I don't know. They're nightmares. Some of them are great and some are nightmares. And like I said, I pride myself. I'm also a tenant. I've been a landlord for years, but I'm also a tenant, and I really pride myself on being a good tenant. As I said before, it was my upbringing. You leave the place better than you find it. But not everyone's like that.
What I found out as a landlord is that you can call the references, and I want to say maybe there's a law or something, but you can't really give a bad rating for a previous tenant that you've had. You can decline to comment, which hopefully the person that calls you, the future landlord, will then say, okay, I can read between the lines.
Right.
I know what that means.
Right.
But you can't talk bad about him. Is that?
Yeah, no,
I
think that's where the like you said, the fine line is. You want to be honest with whoever is potentially going to be renting to that person, but you got to be careful because they can come back and sue you for you're lying about me and this and that, and it's not easy being a landlord. It really isn't. I know it's a great second source of income and everything, but there are good ones and bad ones, and thank God when we get the good ones. And boy, you just hope the bad ones get out of there sooner than later. So
two of the things that I always look at is, do they take care of my place and do they pay the rent on time? And those are really the two determining things. And you're just kind of, as a landlord, you're kind of left in the dark on how do you actually determine if somebody is good or bad. You find a good one, you grab them quickly if you can find out that they're good, maybe from somebody that you know. But you're kind of stumbling in the dark still. I mean, with this day and age of the internet, it shouldn't be that way. We should really have a system like Airbnb where we can rate each other.
Right.
And somebody wants to rent my place, a long-term tenant, I'm going to ask, hey, what's your reference?
Right.
You know, what's your resume? Your reference, your resume for renting other people's places. I want to see that.
I had it in my contract that I would be doing repairs and whatnot and some work on my house because it was an old house and I couldn't let it go for weeks and months at a time. So I had an excuse to go into my house. And because of that, I think it kept people on their toes. If it's a newer property, it's kind of tough to make that claim. But because my house was so old and it needed, there were just various things that had to be taken care of. I think my home, not the condo because it was brand new, but my home, because I was there so much, I think it kept the tenants on their toes and kept up, they made sure that the place wasn't a mess and wasn't in disrepair and whatnot. And if something came up, I told them, please, just let me know. I can take care of it. I think you got to be an active landlord. It's the only way you can kind of deter the negative things from happening to your property.
And you need to be able to, like you said, have access to the property, which is something you can write into the lease.
Yes.
I taught extensively about writing proper leases. I used to write my own leases, and after a couple of years, they've gotten so long because I've added so many things to it. People were just scared to even sign them because they would just go crazy trying to follow all the things. But I've just ended up adding things because things were happening. There was damages. Yeah, I always tell the story of this one tenant, and now we can get into the stories here, by the way, dear listeners in Savannah. I've had a tenant, she was so upset at the end of her lease, and I'm not even sure why, but she had some difficulties in her life, and this was many, many years ago. But when she moved out, and it was close to her moving out, the neighbors were actually calling me, and they said, hey, your house the front door is wide open. Can you send somebody to close it because people can just walk in? I was a long-distance landlord. Property was 3 hours away, so I couldn't just get in the car and drive by and look. And it turned out that they took my fire extinguisher and just sprayed it willingly all over the house. I mean, into the oven, into the fridge, and into the washer and dryer area. I mean, there was fire extinguishing stuff in the vents. I mean, somebody willingly just made sure that the place was just nasty. And after that incident, I started to become a very, very active landlord. Prior to that, I was just kind of stumbling along and, yeah, thanks for the reference. I'll call them if I decide I want to. But after that, I'm like, I'm going to call every reference. Right. And I'm going to make sure that I get, all the information I need about your job, that you actually can pay for the place. I'm going to make sure I collect that security deposit, which is very important to have. And I am not going to allow you to use the security deposit as your last month's rent. And actually, in some states, it's not allowed to collect first and last month's rent, but in some states it is. I don't think it is in Georgia. And by the way, if you're listening to this, you're a landlord and you have experience, feel free to send me messages. My email address is realestate@juliamspencer.com. Send me your comments, questions, or if you have more information or different information, but let us know your input. I mean, we'd like to know. At the moment, I don't have any long-term tenants, but I'm about to put another property on for a long-term tenant to rent. But over the years, I've decided it's worthwhile to get a property manager. So what do you take about property managers? Do you use them?
No, I don't. I mean, I've had what was fortunate for me because I was at a really beautiful home that was on a lake, and I was able to rent it seasonally, especially during the summertime. I could get either a 3-month rental. Sometimes it would be the minimum I do would be 1 month. But I went to a real estate broker who did all my screening ahead of time, and that helped me. Obviously, I had to pay her a fee, but I was able to get good tenants because of that. But no, property manager. I was my own property manager. I was the one who was there cutting the grass I was the one taking care of anything that broke. But, if you're going to be long distance, which you said you have a property 3 hours away, yeah, you can't be your own property manager. You got to find someone who can get over there and take care of it. And again, finding someone who you can trust, who is not going to rip you off, who will be on top of things, that's another screening process, another headache you have to go through as a landlord. But you have to have it. You have to have someone who can be there, in a few hours or in a few minutes to take care of, especially an emergency, like a furnace going out or something like that. You were telling the story about your tenant. I just had a
just knock that, block that out. That's just too painful to listen to, I guess. I have more stories like that. I mean, some of the things. I mean, we've had people leave their animals in their houses and locking the doors and not coming back for a day or two. And you know what animals do?
Oh yeah.
I mean, I've had to call police to free animals out of their homes because it was just, I'm going in to maintain the place, and we had to clean the debris of the animals, I guess, to say it the nice way. There's been a lot of things that I went through as a landlord. I mean, there's so many times I said, I quit. I'm not doing this. This is crazy.
Now, when you usually lease long term, are the tenants responsible for utilities? Because I know this is something that, especially depending upon where you live, here in the South, especially in the summertime, your electric bill can get really high, especially if you have ACs that are left on inside the house. Mm-hmm. In the Northeast, where I live, in the summertime, AC is used every once in a while. I mean, not extensively all the time, but our big cost, is in the wintertime, because we use oil heat. And back in the day, thank God it's not like this anymore, but back when, oil was $150 a gallon at one time, a barrel. I don't know if you remember that or not. But heating oil was, it was up there. Now it's down, at $50 a barrel, which is, a lot more affordable. But I had it written into my lease, especially if they're only going to be for a month or whatever, that you're responsible. I mean, you can crank the heat up as high as you want, but you're paying for it, because it can get very expensive, especially when people, if you're paying for the utilities, they're not going to regulate it. They're going to keep the AC on the whole time.
Yes. They will run it. They will keep it like a refrigerator. Yes,
and the only person that blames yourself. You've got to have that stuff in writing and sign it. Make sure it's signed by both parties. That this is what we're agreeing to.
Well, I think it's generally agreed that if somebody rents a house for long term, and in the state of Georgia, actually, I researched this. What is considered a long term rental is anything over 30 days.
Okay.
So it's generally accepted that people pay for their own utilities. At times, the garbage collection is included if the landlord decides to do that, as well as the landscaping or lawn care, I guess. But utilities such as electricity and oil or gas, natural gas, some places are heated with natural gas still, some older places. And actually, I have a property where the water is heated by gas.
Okay. Now, what about insurance? Do you require some sort of type of renter's insurance or
the one
for
thing,
long term?
Yeah. The one thing I've always written into my leases is that the tenants are responsible for the contents and I'm not liable. So if something breaks inside the house, like there's a flood or somebody's toilet break, it actually happened to me before too. I can share stories here. I used to have a condo, and the lady in the condo right next to mine, we had adjacent walls, had some sort of plumbing issue, and all the water seeped through to my side as well. And the whole floor was ruined, the carpet, everything had to go because it was sewer water. So you can't just like dry it up and patch it over. You had to rip it all out. So in that case, had there been a tenant, this time I was living there actually, but had there been a tenant, the tenant would have just lost out on all their furniture. So I always advise them to get renter's insurance for the contents themselves. And if they don't do that, then in the lease it says I'm not responsible to pay for any contents.
Especially if it's their furniture and whatnot, is what you're saying.
Yes,
okay.
Yes.
All right. Yeah, I'm sure because most of my rentals were furniture provided. So, you just basically move in. So if they damage it, they have to repair it.
Yeah,
I mean, you have to get the damage deposits up front and everything else as well.
Well, that's kind of where you get into vacation rentals. I mean, the vacation rentals that I have, of course, everything is provided. I mean, from cable TV to Wi-Fi, furniture, heat, air conditioning, everything, water. But they're usually much shorter rentals. I mean, they're like for a week or a weekend or something like that. I mean, you're saying you actually provided all this stuff for long-term tenants, so.
Well, no, they had to pay their utilities and whatnot. I mean, I think the shortest period of time I had for my house, I think someone was on a hard spot or they were visiting or something, was maybe 2 weeks.
Oh, okay.
But normally it was a few months at a time. One tenant was there for a couple of years. He was quite a character. I had these big windows facing the lake, and they were thermal paned, and they were double pane, thermal paned, and they fogged up. They were old, and you couldn't necessarily see through them clearly. And he made a deal with me. He said, "Listen, I'm going to be here for a while. I'll pay for half if you'll replace them." And I'm like, "Yeah, okay, no problem." So I did. I mean, I think it had to be like $15,000 total. And I paid $7,500, and I got new windows. So. Yeah, you'll get some clients, you'll get some tenants. Like I said, there's good ones and bad ones. This one was, he was good and bad. I had to physically go to the house every month to collect my rent because I gave him 10 days and it didn't show up. So I'd go there, "Oh, yeah, we meant to send it." They always gave it to me when I went there, but they never put it in the mail ahead of time.
Well, collecting of rent, that opens another whole can of worms there for sure, especially if you're managing the properties yourself.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we can talk about that for hours, I think.
Well, and again, I thank you for calling me a landscaping expert. I consider myself a jack of all trades, master of none.
Good.
I mentioned to Julie on the way over here that when I was living in New York back in the early 1990s, I went and got my real estate license because I figured that's something good in New York City, that if you are good at it, and I think I would have been good at it, that there's so much real estate around there. So I got my license. I got with a great firm, and I told Julie I was only there a week. She goes, "Why a week?" And I said, "Well, because being an actor, I realized I want to go back and act. I know I'm a good actor." And I actually ended up having 3 very good years following that experience. So, I've dabbled in real estate from both ends, being a tenant, a landlord, but also a real estate broker or realtor. It's very interesting. It changes all the time, and it's so fascinating. But it's not something that you can just take lightly and just assume everything is going to be okay. It takes a lot of diligence, a lot of hard work on both ends. You want to get good tenants. You want to be a good landlord. There are bad landlords too. I mean, I know you're not. I know I'm not. But I know there's horrible landlords out there as well.
Well, I probably have been a bad one at some point in this long-standing career of being a landlord, because there was no training to be a landlord.
No.
You just are,
right?
And you figure out how to do it eventually. After you learn that if you make good tenants mad, you lose them.
Yeah, but sometimes people get mad for the strangest reasons too. It's not necessarily something that Yeah, it's one thing if you're negligent. If you blatantly ignore doing something that needs to be done, yes. A tenant has a legitimate excuse to get on your case. But when someone's calling and complaining, thank goodness I never really had this issue, but there are people complaining about, a dripping faucet, and which is fine. I understand that. But that's something that can be fixed. It doesn't have to be fixed tomorrow. It can get fixed. But or the neighbor's dog barking. It's like, call your neighbor and tell them, to tell the dog to stop barking. It's like, that's not my problem. That's your problem.
That's right. That's right.
So.
Oh my gosh. And let's talk about the dog barking story, because I'll have a really fun story to share about that with you listeners. So if you're listening, we are talking about tenants and landlords and how to find good tenants as a landlord, because I have here in the studio with me Patrick Johnson and myself, Julia Spencer. We're both landlords, have been for many years, decades actually. So we are discussing some of the ways and some of the stories that we've experienced with tenants, and also as tenants with our landlords, because we've been both. And At least for me speaking, I have been a landlord and tenant both at the same time. And you're listening to WRUU-LP, Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul, and we will talk some more about landlords and tenants. But first, I have a very important message for you. If you enjoy our programming on WRUU-LP, please support the station with a donation. As an individual, you can give any amount, become a basic station member, or become a serious fan of the station. To check out membership rates and to donate to the station, go to www.wruu.org/individual and select to donate monthly or subscribe to an annual membership. Again, to donate to the station, go to www.wruu.org/individual and select to donate monthly or subscribe to an annual membership. Thank you for listening to and supporting WRUU-LP. And we will play a song for you right now and take a little bit of a break. And we will be right back. And thank you again for tuning in into WRUU-LP. You are listening to Real Estate Real Talk with Julia M. Spencer. Here in the studio with me, I have Patrick Johnson, a friend of mine who is also a long-term landlord, and I'm also a landlord. So we're talking about tenants today and some of the things that we've experienced with tenants in the many years and decades that we have been landlords. We're having a great time actually here in the studio, laughing and comparing notes here. but before the break, I was actually talking about, or actually Patrick brought up the issue of the barking dog. So let me tell you my barking dog story here on a Wednesday afternoon. Something entertaining for you if you're driving to your lunch hour and getting some lunch here in this beautiful city. So, all right, so he's making a face here. So I've actually had a dog, and you know my dog that I used to have. It's been a long time. He died of old age actually a couple of years ago, but we've had him for a long time, and he was probably the quietest dog I've ever had. And I'm talking about something that happened to me with a neighbor, and the neighbor doesn't live in the neighborhood anymore, but this dog never barked. This dog that I had, he really never barked. You would not hear him. If another dog could attack him, the kids can play with him, and no, he would just not bark back. So one day, I actually had the police come to my door because a neighbor has complained that my dog barked too much. And the first thing I thought is, well, who would this neighbor be? I know everybody in the neighborhood. I've been living there for 7 years at the time. And it turns out it was a new tenant. I wasn't the landlord, somebody else was, but it was a new tenant. It was 2 houses over from my house. And they complained to the police my dog was barking all night long and keeping them awake. And they sent the police to my house. So anyways, I cleared it up with the police officer and really assured him, really, my dog doesn't bark. That's the first thing. But if he was, the way to have handled that, obviously, is not to call the police,
right,
but, find the owner and talk to them. So,
well, and I may have mentioned this in the last show, and I apologize. Like I said, I volunteer for my community board as well, and we get our board gets complaints all the time from people complaining of barking dogs, of leaf blowers, of weed whackers, of lawnmowers. Again, your first course of action is not to call the community board to go and talk to the people or call the police. Be a neighbor. Go introduce yourself. Say, hey, look, it's Sunday morning. Could you hold off on the construction till 9 o'clock? So at least I can sleep till 9 or whatever, or have some peace and quiet. Or even it's Saturday morning, hold off till 8. During the week, I think the town ordinance was you can start at 7. Ordinances are different all over the place, but barking dogs, again, that's something that it's get off your butt and go take care of it yourself. It's not
talk
the landlord's.
To someone. Exactly.
You might end up making a nice friend or meet a nice neighbor. You never know.
Yeah, I agree with that. So anyway, that was my dog barking story. It was actually comical because I know my dog was not the barking one, and I could probably even point him to the right direction who the barking dog was, but it certainly wasn't mine. Okay, well, the other topic I wanted to touch on a little bit, since we're talking about landlords and tenants, having here a lively discussion between two landlords, maybe you can get some good information, and maybe some things that you can take away if you're a landlord or a tenant to use in your dealings with the other party, is property managers. Now, as I mentioned, in the beginning when I started being a landlord, I didn't use any property managers. Most all property managers collect about 10% off your rent, and then in order to find somebody and place them and do the background check and show somebody the property initially, I think they take sometimes 1 month's rent, maybe half month's rent, up to 1 month's rent. That's what I've seen them do. And actually these days you can even hire people to find and place tenants, but then you have to do the day-to-day management yourself. So you can actually pick and choose. But back in the day when I was doing it, it was 10%, and they would take about half of your first month's rent. And then they would sometimes even collect maybe $200 or $300 of like a contingency fund. So if something small happens with the property, they just go ahead and fix it without bothering you, the owner. Like if there's, somebody needs to come and fix a toilet or something. But you haven't really used property managers.
Well, no, I think as we discussed a little bit earlier, I think when you live quite a distance away from a place you're renting, you need someone who can, again, in a pinch, cover things for you. But the furthest I lived away from my home was about 60 miles. So I could get up there later in the day or sometime the next day and take care of anything that happened. But I know a lot of people who have vacation rentals down in Florida or here in the Georgia area, and they live in the Northeast or somewhere in the Midwest. Especially if it's a particular home association, I think it's required. You have to have someone to maintain your yard. You have to have someone to maintain your house if you're going to be renting it out. But I think, again, you have to have someone there to look over things. I wouldn't necessarily trust the tenant per se. That's just the skeptic in me, even though when something breaks at the house I'm renting now, I will fix it. I won't even bother my landlady because it's not worth it unless it's something really big. For example, we have an oil heater in the basement, the furnace. It's getting up there in age. And the guy just serviced it, and he said, look, you're going to need this, this, and this eventually. We've been there a lot longer than we expected to be, and she's let us stay there longer than we expected her to let us stay there. So we're now absorbing some of the cost. She said, look, if you guys want to stay, if I have to do some repairs, I would like for you to help me cover some of the cost. And I think it's fair because we have a great deal. We have a great house. I don't want to leave. I haven't found any place else I want to live yet. So, we'll probably absorb it. It's worth it for us. I pay less now in rent than I did in property tax. So I find that to be a good deal for me. I mean, granted, as I said before, real estate is your nest egg. It's something that is going to be there for you down the road, but you got to take care of it. And especially if it's an investment property, you got to take care of it. And if it ends up you spend more to fix things than you are getting your rent, it's probably not worth having that property or even renting it out for that matter.
And that's actually a really good topic because a lot of people ask me, and I've had very wealthy investors that I work with that are kind of on the brink of whether they should purchase real estate to live in or should they rent it. In fact, I'm dealing with someone who's actually stationed out in Las Vegas and has been renting a condo on the Strip for many, many years. And several of us investors are kind of talking to him, and he's getting information from different places. But his question has always been to me, should I buy a property or should I just keep renting? And then he lists all these reasons why renting is better than buying. And in fact, we actually got on a conference call one time, and we had a little bit of a shouting match almost, and I was kind of observing this. But there's these people that are very, very strongly for being homeowners. And then there's the people that want nothing to do with home ownership. They want to be renting. And I mean, there's opponents and for both areas, obviously, and you have to be. And speaking for myself, my primary residence where I live right now is actually a rental, and that's kind of comical because I own several houses in the same street where I live. But for me, at the time, it was better to rent, depending on, of course, what rent you get. It was better to get a cheap place that was exactly where I wanted to be and not have to deal with the maintenance. While as for somebody else, maybe it's a cheaper way to just rent because it's cheaper than even paying taxes to just go ahead and purchase a place.
Yeah.
So,
well, and also with the tax laws the threat of tax laws changing constantly, who knows? I mean, right now you're able to write off your mortgage, which is great, but that law could change it. Who knows? These are all the things that you have to contemplate every time you decide, am I going to buy? Am I going to rent? And if I do rent,
And there's so many things to consider. I mean, we could actually probably have another show on just the tax implications of owning versus renting, of being a real estate investor versus somebody that doesn't own any real estate. I mean, this particular person that I'm mentioning here is actually used to be a Savannah resident here. The amount of taxes that he pays, being a very wealthy person, I mean, it just makes me cringe because he should be ideally buying real estate to offset some of the income that he has in other places, and a lot of people don't quite see it that way. I mean, they see real estate as a burden, and it is something you do have to take care of, and you do have to recruit tenants and property managers and construction people. And this is kind of like the topic of our show: is how do you find all these people, and how do you even embrace all of these different pieces into one to make it successful, so you don't lose in the end, because you want to make something on your real estate and not end up having to pay out all the time.
Well, and also depends. I mean, it depends to how emotionally tied you are to things. If this is an investment home, I'm trying to compare my war stories, but the condo that I first purchased, I was talking about this earlier, and then we changed subjects. But the tenant, his kids end up drawing all over the walls.
Let's finish that story. I want to hear that.
And you can't paint over crayon.
No, that's crayon what you said. Yeah,
you gotta sand it down or replace the drywall altogether. You paint and paint and paint and paint and paint, and it keeps coming through. And then they put a hot pot down on the countertop and had a big burn mark on the countertop. So I had to find a way to make that into like a cutting board thing. But I mean, it bugs me as an owner when people don't respect. That's all it is. It's just about respect. Respect the properties. That's all.
So at this point, I want to talk about a couple of questions I had from some of my subscribers of my YouTube videos that are related to this topic of property managers, landlords, tenants, and we can chime in on that. The first person actually said that, and I'm going to just go ahead and read it because it's relevant. Nothing can ever replace the actual owner coming to the property. Tenants see the owner, they will have confidence that they care and will make repairs. You do not need property managers unless you have a lot of units. Remember, they take around 10% of the gross each month. And that's very much true. I mean, they do take 10%. I mean, it's 10% in my case has always been worthwhile because I didn't have to show properties and deal with them and take phone calls. But you actually manage your properties yourself, as we mentioned, and I have done the same thing. So I guess it all comes down to whether you find the right property manager or how do you recruit them. I mean, now we're not talking just about finding good contractors, good tenants, good landlords, but good property managers is a big thing also in real estate investing, right?
Yeah, but also it depends on the person themselves as well. I mean, no offense, Julia, but finding tools in your house is not an easy thing to do. So when
my personal house, yes, there are.
So when a light socket needs to be replaced and having to use a knife as a screwdriver.
Okay, Patrick's putting me on the spot here. Thank you.
But, I've always been pretty handy. I mean, we built our own house in Albuquerque, New Mexico. My dad was the GC, and my brothers and I, helped build it. So I learned the confidence of, how to build a home and also how to take care of a home. We did 90% of the work ourselves. We didn't do the drywall and we didn't do the insulation, and we didn't do the masonry, the brick on the outside. Everything else we did: plumbing, heating, electric. So I have that, whether it's naive or not, but I have that confidence that I can fix things. And like I said, I want to give it my best shot first before I go out and get someone else. So therefore, yeah, I didn't really have a property manager.
Well, you're kind of handy, though. I mean, when you walk into my house and you're like, where is such and such tool? Or do you have such and such tool? And I'm like, okay, you're speaking Greek to me. I don't even know what you're speaking of. So, but if you're actually handy, then it's not always necessary
right.
to hire
and I like that 10%. I like saving that 10% of what it would cost someone else to do what I know I can do myself. But again, if I know I'm getting in over my head, then that's when you have to pick up the phone and call someone, whether it be a plumber, electrician, or whatever else.
Mm-hmm. So. Now, I have been a tenant, and actually am a tenant, and I don't particularly care if the owner comes to the property. I just care that somebody comes to the property and fixes something. Mm-hmm. I mean, this comment that I had on one of my videos, the lady actually thinks, well, it's probably better that the owner comes. But, it's actually not really that necessary as long as you can send somebody that can do the job and do it pretty quickly. I mean, most people are quite understanding as long as the work gets done, I guess.
Right, as long as the work gets done. That's the most important thing. Mm-hmm. But again, getting someone there, and that's, again, we don't know. I mean, it's so difficult to know if you're getting a good property manager or not. And you've got to you got to do your homework. You got to ask around, find other people, who they've used, if there are people in your area that are using a proper manager or not. Or make a deal with the tenant. If they say, look, I'm going to have to get the grass cut. If you want to cut the grass, I'll knock your rent off, $10, $15 a month or something like that. Those are things, again, you have to write in.
I won't sign up for that.
You can't. You don't own a lawnmower.
That's right. I don't, and I never intend to buy one. But, that's actually a very good statement. So here's something I wanted to add. If you're listening and you are maybe a landlord, or even if you're, a tenant, you can recommend this to your landlord. This is what has helped me to get around that whole topic of trying to find the right contractors to fix things for you. If you get it in your head, and this is my recommendation to you, if you get it in your head, if you own a home and you're the homeowner, there are a finite set of systems in the home that something can go wrong with. And that would be, of course, your air conditioning here in the south, your heating, if you're up north further, but you need some heat here too sometimes. You have your plumbing, your electricity, and then you have all your appliances that something can go wrong with. So those are really like your main things. If there is anything wrong with those, what you can actually do, and this is what I've done, is to get a homeowner's warranty. And this is not homeowner's insurance, but it's a homeowner's warranty plan where you basically sign up with one of the companies. I think the one that I used was American Home Shield, but there's American Choice. There's like so many others. But just type in like a Google search or something and just search for homeowner warranty. That's the name of that kind of insurance, actually. And what you do is you pay a certain amount per month, and you can also pay it up front for like a year maybe. And it just gets automatically deducted from your checking account, whatever. But then every time something breaks, you call them up and they will arrange for a contractor to come out. And all you have to pay is a set fee. So, for example, the big home that I have, the biggest one, I pay, something breaks, like what we actually had an issue like just the other day with the plumbing. We had actually garbage disposal that got clogged up. He's laughing right here because
I'm the one who had to fix it.
Coming to my house bleeding. He's like, do you have a Band-Aid? I'm like, what did you do? Anyway, our garbage disposal broke or was clogged or whatever. It ended up causing a plumbing issue. And Patrick is trying to fix it. He's staying at that house. and one of my vacation rentals, and I'm like, well, why are you doing this? I got somebody I can call. And he said, don't call anyone. But, I'm already paying for the service. It's about $50 a month that I pay. And then somebody comes out, I can just call them up, and it costs me $75, and they'll fix whatever's broken. If the garbage disposal had to be replaced, it would have been $75. If the whole plumbing under the sink had to be replaced, would have been $75.
Wow. Okay.
Anything else, and even if I had like 2 or 3 issues, for example, 2 or 3 plumbing issues in the same house at the same time, still only one service call is $75.
Wow.
That's it, and parts, labor, everything included. So I thought that was a really good deal for my home, and so because I'm not very handy, and I got that.
But what's good for your home though too, especially being an Airbnb home. I mean, you've got so many people. I mean, you're one of the fortunate ones. You have so many people in and out of that house every week, every month, every year.
Mm-hmm.
And you trust that everyone will, again, respect your property. But things go wrong. People make mistakes. People maybe put things down the garbage disposal they shouldn't. They may.
Did you do that? Is that what happened?
No. A rock's
He's
not
lying.
Good. No. But, people try to flush things down toilets they shouldn't too.
That's true.
So... having that kind of service would be great, especially being the all thumbs that you are when it comes to fixing things like that. So I didn't realize you had that service.
Yeah.
I
have it on every house. In fact, I've had people trying to open garage doors with garage door openers when the actual garage door was jammed. They have these little jamming things that just actually lock the garage door and just break my whole garage door, break the garage door opener, everything, $75. So I have that on every house. This is something that might recommend to you if you own a home and you're just tired, like I became, tired of fixing stuff. It seemed like every week something was breaking. So I'm a big advocate of those insurances. I'm not going to tell you which one to buy, of course, or where to go. But check it out. If you own a home and you're tired of fixing stuff, or you're incapable like myself, that's a good thing, especially if you're a landlord and you're at a long distance. It's really easy to arrange for somebody to come and fix your stuff. And the biggest systems, of course, that will fail more than likely eventually in the South that are most important to have fixed and in good shape all the time are your air conditioning system. And you can live without proper, you can turn off your water if the water is spewing all over or use a different bathroom, but the air conditioning breaks. It's pretty much a showstopper if you're a vacation rental host like myself.
Yeah, of course, down here.
Mm-hmm. So
I didn't know that. That's great insurance.
Yeah. So don't do that again. I mean, or if you want to and it keeps you happy, go ahead.
No,
and fix
it was just the absurdity of the whole situation, and I'm like, how the heck did this happen? So
Patrick disappears for 2 hours and he's fixing a sink, and I'm like, why? Anyway, well, we have only actually a few more minutes left for the show. I hope you've been entertained. I wanted to briefly touch just on one little topic, I guess, at the very end, and we kind of already talked about it, but it's another comment I had from a subscriber. And it was basically somebody that just mentioned that they're so glad that I mentioned the importance of not relying too much on property managers. And because a lot of the property managers actually don't do their job. So again, I wanted just to go back, since we were talking about how to find contractors, how to find good tenants, how to find good landlords. How do you find good property managers? So I'm going to add my 2 cents worth, and I'm going to give you the last word after that. What I have done in the past is basically ask around. I mean, there's really no place of reference online that I was able to find where I could find good information on a good property manager. I mean, it really is word of mouth, basically, or talking to people. Word of mouth is really the only way. And trying them out. I mean, I have had fired several property managers for not doing their job. I mean, they collect 10% every month, and when there's an issue, they can't even communicate with the tenant. I'm just gonna backtrack. Real quick story here. One of my tenants actually ended up parking their entire lawn equipment business in my front yard. So So I don't even know what kind of equipment this was, but they're like these little tractors and tractor trailers
and like that,
oh my gosh, the whole front yard was full with equipment. And this was a tiny house. I mean, you actually know this house. It's the one by the school. So it's a very, very small front yard. I mean, barely has a parking spot for one car in the driveway. I mean, it's very small. And it was just packed with equipment. The neighbors were complaining. I started getting notices from the county. I mean, it was really bad. And I told my property manager at the time, hey, can you tell the tenant to move the stuff someplace else? Because it's not a parking ground for equipment. You know, it's a residential neighborhood. They live there. You know, kids are walking by there from school that might, touch something, fall and break their, I'm going to be liable for somebody to get hurt. But anyway, long story short, he never did anything, and I ended having to eventually just get rid of him and the tenant too. And it was ugly. I mean, it was really bad. So yes, if you're looking to get property managers, do your research, ask around, try them, and if they don't work out, figure out what is in your contract of how you can get rid of them.
Right.
And don't hesitate.
Well,
what is your 2 cents?
My 2 cents worth is, speaking from experience, be your own property manager. I mean,
that's the best.
Because that's all I know.
Best.
But that's all I know. I've never hired anyone to be one for me. And, I'm not looking forward to the day if it ever happens where I have to hire someone to do that for me. But, I've always felt that you're your own best boss. So, and you're your own best caretaker as well. So if it's your property, you should be one taking care of it.
And that's probably the best advice. I definitely encourage you to do that if you have the time. But if you don't have the time and you don't know a lot about it, just keep listening to my show. I'm going to be talking about tenants, landlords, property managers, real estate, mortgages, everything right here on Real Estate Real Talk at WRUULP. You're listening to WRUULP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul. And thank you again for listening. And I wanted to just give you some more information really quick before I go off the air. The Savannah Voice Festival is premiering a new opera by Michael Ching entitled Anna Hunter, The Spirit of Savannah on Thursday, November 2nd through Saturday, November 4th at the Davenport House, 324 East State Street. For more information and tickets, go to savannahvoicefestival.org/festival-events. Thank you again so much for listening. I wish we didn't run out of time. I could talk for hours about this. But thanks for being in the studio, Patrick. And hopefully we can welcome you again soon. We have a lot more to talk about, of course. But tune in next week again on Wednesday. I'm always on at 12:06 p.m. on Wednesdays. Real Estate Talk with Julia M. Spencer, Real Estate Real Talk. This is where we're talking about the actual world of real estate. And tune in, and we hope to get your comments and feedback. Send us messages. My email is realestate@juliamspencer.com. And back to regular programming now. We'll talk to you soon. Thank you.
For your free guide to real estate investing, visit juliamspencer.com.